Good morning. It is Friday, the 22nd of December 2023. You're watching Morning Brew on Labour Social. How you doing this morning? Hello, hello, hello. So we start with the news that the economy contracted in the third quarter between July and September by 0.1%. Disappointing everyone, really. But the fact that the government were hoping for a not growth, but not a recession type situation where it was actually 0%, and they were like, oh damn, it was zero, it was minus 0.1%. And it's like, shouldn't we be aspiring for a little bit more than this? Shouldn't we maybe stop effing about with culture wars and obsession over migration figures and this absolute nonsense that is the Rwanda deal, the obsession with making people's lives more miserable, with saying things like homelessness is a lifestyle choice instead of actually tackling homelessness and the impact it has on the economy. It's much cheaper and more humane and just a nicer thing to do to actually house people who are homeless. It's the best thing for our economy and not just our soul. Our collective souls, I guess. 16 years we've had of this. Well, we've had 13 years of the Tories being absolutely crap at running the economy. They've just been absolutely awful. Every decision they've taken has reduced our ability to make money in this country, from austerity, which stole money out of the pockets of the poorest in society, meaning they couldn't spend money on stuff they didn't need, to Brexit, which destroyed all hope of getting any decent amount of foreign direct investment into the country. Rishi Sunak was celebrating the fact that it had gone up a little bit from what it was last year, which was, or the year before, which was £10 billion of foreign direct investment that came in. 10 billion. Down from hundreds of billions. I mean, it was just really, that's what you're celebrating. It's gone up a bit from that. And that's what the Tories do a lot. They will look at the last couple of years and compare the economy with them. They'll look at the figures for crime or the figures for people coming across in small boats, and they'll look at those figures and say, look at those figures 2 years ago. We're doing a lot better than then. Yeah, you're comparing yourself with yourself. It's a bit like being in school and like there's you tell everyone, oh, I'm getting straight A's. I'm getting straight A's. What are you actually getting? Well, I got a D, but the year before I got an E. So if you think about it, that's a massive improvement. That's a 20% improvement. It's like, yeah, but you didn't get an A. That's what you need. You need to be getting A's in order to do what you want to do in life. And what I want this country to do at the moment is stop being so horrible to start with, get rid of the Tories. That's the second thing. But mainly, and this all is part of the parcel of the thing that we need to do next year, which is to vote these bastards out of office. We need to improve the economic outlook for the country. So the GDP for the UK was around £3 trillion back in 2007. That was 16 years ago. Next year, it'll be 17 years ago. 17 years. And the economy now is around $3 trillion. It's been $3 trillion now for 17 years, the best part of 17 years. It's gone down a little bit and come up again, and gone down a little bit and gone up again. But generally speaking, if you look at long-term trends, our economy hasn't grown. But, neither's the economy of Italy or France, to be fair. But the economies of Germany and Ireland and the USA have grown massively in that same time. The economy of India has grown massively in that same time, so much so that they overtook us as the fifth biggest economy in the world recently. I mean, what we're seeing now is the outcome of having people who are incompetent in charge for 13 years. And I don't think that Labour are going to get in and flick a magic switch and suddenly the economy is going to bounce back. It's not, because we have huge systemic problems in our economy right now. And I know the economy is boring, and I know that it's not as sexy as talking about culture wars and things like that. But the reality is, it underpins the quality of life for all of us. The reason why young people can't get on the property ladder is because of the economy. The reason why people haven't had a real wage in real terms, they haven't had an increase in their wages in real terms for 20 years is because of the economy. The reason why, life expectancy is going down in this country, which is probably one of the most shocking statistics that's come out of the last 10 years. It's because, of the economy. It impacts absolutely everything. It impacts people's physical health. It impacts their mental health. It impacts their quality of life. And we had a good thing going when we had competent grown-ups in charge. Like them all over them. Tony Blair, I wish, if I could do one thing, get in a time machine and go back, I would say to him, don't invade Iraq. Simple as that. Just do not do it. Tell George W. Bush to piss off, go it alone. Don't invade Iraq, because that was the biggest mistake that a politician's made. Well, yeah, it's bigger than Brexit. Let's face it, because a lot of people died. Probably more people died. Not saying that people didn't die because of Brexit. Of course they did, because Brexit is tied inextricably with the shoddy performance of our economy over the last almost 2 decades now. I mean, this is getting really stupid. If you look at the first 10 years of the Labour administration, when they were in between 1997 and 2007, the economy doubled. It went from around $1.5 trillion to around $3 trillion. It doubled. And then since 2007, since the economic credit crunch, we're facing the climate crunch now. We haven't seen this. We haven't seen any sort of growth on any scale. Not like doubling the economy, but even just doing better than we were 16, 17 years ago. And that, my friends, is the most damning thing about this Tory leadership, government, scumbaggery, administration, whatever you want to call it. So what I want, basically, in the next few months, when we run up to this general election, is every time there's a Tory on the telly, or on Question Time, on Newsnight, or maybe in a public forum in which you can ask them questions, or maybe you're just talking to a Tory voter, the question has to be asked: why is the economy not growing in 16 years, 17 years? Ask them that question, because here's the thing: the population of the UK in 2007 was around 60 million. It's now around 68 million. So our economy has grown by more than our population has grown by more than 10%, but our economy hasn't grown at all. That means in real terms, per person, the amount of money we have each has decreased. And that's a question that the Tories just cannot answer with their usual bullshit rhetoric around culture wars and economic migrants and all this kind of nonsense. They can't blame anyone else for that. They can only blame themselves. I mean, that's the only option open to them for that. It is an absolute killer question for Conservatives, because they can bleat on about COVID. They can bleat on about the invasion of Ukraine or the credit crunch even in 2007, 2008. But the reality is that other countries went through that as well. And countries like Ireland have doubled their economy in that same period because they've opened themselves up to the world. Britain, on the other hand, has closed itself off from the world, put up the drawbridge, had horrible people like Cruella Braverman stand up in Parliament and give her own version of Enoch Powell's Rivers of Blood speech. I mean, we're not an attractive place to invest at the moment. We've let down investors left, right and centre. We've cost our neighbours billions in new infrastructure that's had to be built. We're going to have our fingerprints taken, our faces scanned, our eyeballs scanned when we're going into Europe from next year. And that's going to come in at a great expense to the other countries in Europe, because maybe where they just had 2 desks to do that before, they're going to need 7 or 8 in order to process all the people from the UK. Because don't forget, most of the people coming into Europe, you think about like people coming from other places like the US or like Australia, it is dwarfed by the number of people coming from the UK, traveling around our own continent, the continent that unfortunately a lot of the older generation, not all old people and not anyone watching this video, I want to stress that, I can't stress that enough, but a lot of older people seem embarrassed about the fact that they are part of this continent, the greatest continent on earth, Europe. Um, anyway, so that's all I got to say about the economy for now. Might pop back into it, but 16, 17 years of hurt. And 13 of them, 14 years next year, is going to be the fault of the Tories. They could have grown the economy. And to be fair to the outgoing Labour government of 2010, the economy was getting back on track. The economy was growing. Gordon Brown and Alistair Darling managed to make a deal that saved literally the world economy. A lot of people forget that, but they did that. And if you look at the economic figures, that our GDP was rising and would have continued to rise, except in 2010 the Tories got in. And the first thing they did was, we need to bring in austerity, the worst possible thing you can do at the worst possible time. And then because that didn't hurt people who aren't filthy rich enough, they brought in Brexit. And then because that didn't hurt people who were not filthy rich enough, they presided over one of the most calamitous episodes in British history, which was their response to the COVID pandemic. To go back to the Gulf War, Gulf War II, I really wish that had never happened, and a lot of us don't, because it's used as something to bludgeon over the heads of Labour. They say, Labour, last time they were in, remember Iraq? Yeah, I do. And it was shit. Now, there's no doubt about it. There's no defending it. And there were no weapons of mass destruction. The intel that was given to the government, or the government gave to us, was faulty. We have to accept that. But there was a lot of good things that Labour did, in this country at least, that don't outweigh what happened in Iraq, because I know it was a bloodbath. I know it was a tragedy. And again, it has sullied the name of the last Labour government in many ways. But I do think that in this election, if anyone on the left starts going, you Blairites, Iraq, those people are coming from a position of brutal privilege, in which they know that they and the people that they love, if they love anyone, I don't know, will survive another 5 years of this Tory government, this Tory monkey clown car on fire going off a cliff. Hundreds of thousands of people won't survive that. And we don't have the luxury. We don't have the luxury anymore. It's as simple as that. Okay, so I'm going to move on now onto your messages. Thank you very much. Lots of messages this morning. Everyone saying hi and morning campers at the beginning. We've also got One Angry Pagan saying good morning. Good morning to the One Angry Pagan, because it's the winter solstice today. Lots of people at Stonehenge celebrating that. They must have been freezing. I work in the retail sector. It was obvious from being on the ground. Sales dropped off unprecedentedly for us in October, and they haven't recovered. Graham, is there a billboard enough anywhere to advertise all the Tory failings? Well, you see, the thing is, if it had been like one major failing, and this sort of ties in with Iraq. Iraq was a major failing that you can just point to and say, look at that. And it was one of the few major failings of the Blair Brown government. If we hadn't done that, things might be very different today, obviously, especially in the Middle East, but also in our country. But the fact that the Tories have done just so many bad things, so many cock-ups, so many scandalous things, so many sleazy things, so many MPs, Tory MPs that have been done for lying, for sexual misconduct, for just the most horrific actions that you could, do. Disrespect of everything that we hold dear, our democracy, our parliament. These are the cowboys who lied to the Queen and said we needed to prorogue Parliament. They lied to the Queen to try and force through a no-deal Brexit, which would have been devastating for the British economy, devastating for normal people in this country who don't have an offshore bank account, like what Rees-Mogg does, like what Boris Johnson does, like what all those Rishi Sunak, worth over £700 million, our richest prime minister of all time. I mean, there's just so many of it. Well done for getting to level 1 there, One Angry Pagan, for being a member for 7 months. Not long left. Yeah. Let's get back to reality. There's no such thing as culture wars, according to the Tories. What? Oh. So the culture wars that they invented, there's no such thing. They'll say it's just common sense. Do you know what's common sense? Getting rid of the Tories. Also, being nice. Being nice to people is common sense. Being kind, being generous is common sense because it makes you feel good. That's why we have things like Christmas, and other cultures around the world have similar events where people are just nice to each other because it's nice to be nice. But the Tories, they just don't have that circuitry. They just don't have it in them. They're a bunch of Ebenezer Scrooges before the visitation of the ghosts. Sarah Davis, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Thank you for everything you do for us. Oh, thank you, Sarah. You are very, very welcome. That's very kind of you. Merry Christmas. Purity says, I had a problem with the concept of exponentially growing economies on a finite planet. We just offshore manufacturing and increase the population more. People, fewer resources equals what we have now. Purity, you are absolutely right. And I am not a big thing. I'm not a proponent of unchecked exponential growth. I don't think that's possible. We've gone through a Keynesian cycle of boom and bust. And obviously, like New Labour, when they came in 97, they said, we're going to defy the Keynesian cycle of boom and bust. But the reality is they boomed until 2007. And then they went bust because of the climate, the credit. I keep calling it the climate crunch because of the credit crunch. So we weren't moving away from there. But what I do think that we have to see is at least the economy growing in proportion with the population. And that's something that we haven't seen. When we talk about the economy growing by 0.1% and like, yes, we've seen economic growth. We've staved off recession for another few months because a recession is 2 quarters of what's it called? Not growth, loss, contracting of the economy. But when you consider the fact that our population has grown by more than 10% over a similar period, it does mean there's less money to go round, which is a huge problem economically. And I'm not saying that we need to have more and more and more and more. I'm saying that just having a situation in which our economy had also grown by 10% while our population had grown by 10% would be a much better situation than the one we're in at the moment, where everyone on this island who wasn't born rich and doesn't have offshore bank accounts is poorer than they were 16, 17 years ago. Good morning. Lots of people saying good morning. Not really, says number 3. I did a major video, a theory about conspiracy, highly relevant. Okay, I'll have to check that out, Richard. Thank you very much. Purity says, when I was young and stupid, I honestly believed that one day I'd vote for a political party and feel good about not the better of two evil. The optimism of youth, eh? Well, Purity, we have a plan for that. We really do. There's a lot of us who are the YouTubers, TikTokers and Twitterers who are working together to ensure that when Labour win next year, if they win, touch wood, when they win next year, we will be there holding them to account. We're not going to pack up our channels once Labour get into power. In fact, that's when the real work begins. A majority of Labour members and unions want to bring in PR. It would be in Labour's better interests to bring in PR. It really would, because although they will enjoy quite a big victory next year by the looks of things, by the looks of the polls, it is unsustainable. And for 100 years, Labour has only been in power for a third of that, and the Tories have been in power for 2/3 of that, even though in the last election, over 50% of the population voted for parties that were offering a second referendum on the leaving of the EU, the abandonment of the EU, the most stupid thing we've ever done socially, or economically, or psychologically. Since the Iraq War, it is off the charts stupid. But that's the situation that we are left with when we have first past the post. We have a government that has secured the minority of votes, and unfortunately they take the plurality. can't even say that word. The majority of the seats, an 80-seat majority on 43% of the vote, is a bit unfair, don't you think? So proportional representation would change that. And although I know that the dickheads on the far right, like Farage and Tyson, all those private school bastards, they want PR as well because they're small parties and they feel like they'll have more power in Parliament. You see, what Farage and Tice have done is they've really shot themselves in the foot going for Brexit, because being elected to the European Parliament was a lot easier than being elected to our Parliament, which is a bit of a shut shop. If you're not part of one of the big parties, it's very, very difficult to get a seat in the UK Parliament. And it will make it easier for them. So they support it as well. And although I hate them and everything they stand for, I feel like empowering the voters, so that when they put an X on the piece of paper, something actually changes, which for a lot of people that's never happened in their lifetime, except when they voted for Brexit. It would be a good thing, and it would get people more interested in politics. It would get more people fired up and ready to hold lawmakers to account for the bullshit that they come out with. I want a government that serves the people, not a government that just serves itself. Thank you very much to Di Stanton for the £10 super chat. And Merry Christmas, one of my heroes. Keep up the good fight. DM'd you via Patreon. Oh, thank you, Di. I'll check that out after the show. Patreon's really annoying. People write to me on Patreon, and I'm supposed to get like an email that says, hey, someone's written to you on Patreon. And then I have to log into Patreon and, have a look at the messages. I don't get the messages telling me that someone's... It's really annoying. So sometimes I go on Patreon and there's like 3 messages that I haven't seen. So anyone who has messaged me on Patreon, I'm very sorry. I will have a look at that after the show today. But thank you very much for the super chat. It was really appreciated. Christopher says, inflation doesn't exist in reality. It's a shared delusion that the value of goods must increase. In reality, a pound of gold took the same amount of effort regardless of demand. So greed drives price. Well, yeah, Christopher, I mean, we can talk about I'm probably not the best person to talk about this sort of more in-depth economic ideas, but the value of something is very interesting. It's like diamonds are worthless. I mean, there's loads of them, but De Beers, who bought up all the diamond mines in Africa, they make sure that there is a restricted supply, an artificially restricted supply of diamonds to keep the price high. So you have millions and millions and millions of pounds worth of diamonds just locked away in vaults to keep the prices artificially high. You think about electronics, the way that we have planned obsolescence in our electronic goods now, where if you have a phone that's 3 years old, it gets really sluggish, and they do it on purpose so you buy a new phone. The value of stuff is what people are prepared to pay for it. I think about electric cars a lot now because I'm seeing a lot of them on the road, and I think they're quite expensive still at the moment. I don't think you're going to get much change from £50,000, Jesus, for an electric car at the moment. However, I'm old enough to remember when DVD players were £2,000. £2,000 for a DVD player. A Dixon's, Curry's, Comet, remember them? Rumbelows, where you used to hire your TV. 2,000, and then within a couple of years, they were like 20 quid. I mean, the price of them just fell off a cliff, quite rightly, because the manufacturing process was a lot cheaper to make them. You think about widescreen TVs now, we can buy these massive TVs, and they're pretty cheap, because the manufacturing process is a lot cheaper than making cathode ray tube televisions, which involves glass blowing, and so you have a lot more defective, thrown away stuff. You have a lot more redundancy in the glass blowing industry. If you can imagine, you're making glass blown tubes for TV, and you have a speck of dust or sand in the glass, you have to throw it away and start again, melt it down, start again, whatever you do, get rid of that impurity. I mean, you don't have that with flat screen TVs. And the other thing is, the flat screen TV manufacturers have teamed up with streaming companies to ensure that your actual TV for streaming stuff is fairly cheap. And then you spend more money on streaming stuff because you think, well, I only spent a few £100 on the TV, so I've got money now to spend on Disney Plus or Netflix or Amazon Prime or whatever. The value of something and the price of something, it the actual cost. So let's talk about cost. The cost of making the thing, or the cost of getting the thing out of the ground, isn't necessarily relative to the actual price that you pay. And the best example of that, probably gold, but also oil. Oil doesn't really change that much. I mean, it's still getting pumped out the ground. And they talk about global shocks because one oil producer can't produce oil or whatever. But seriously, I mean, it shouldn't have that much of an effect on the global price of oil. There's enough oil. There's easily enough oil out there. But unfortunately, but yeah, the prices go up and down like crazy because someone's turning those dials. As was it Nadine Dorries who thought that they turn dials on the internet to make things more offensive or something? £2,000 is £2,000, says what does this button do? Lee Corn says, has anyone noticed how Heinz are taking advantage of inflation and put their prices up by a ridiculous amount? Yes. Don't buy your Heinz baked beans. Just get the little ones right next to it, and a fraction of the price. Tastes the same. Ransons have grown on me. Teresa Coffee, Britain's greatest turnip. Thank you very much for the super chat, One Angry Pagan. £10 super chat. I give a little heart to that. Hopefully this will bring us closer to the general election. Wishing a safe and cozy Jiwa for Yi and Yikin, for Graham, Phil, and all in chat. Oh, thank you very much. That's very kind of you. Plum Duff says, so yes, very George Orwell. I think that's responding to something that the Tories have done, probably. Logging in and using passwords are the bane of modern living. I'll banish them to the past with lead paint and radioactive glass. Well, I've got two Patron accounts. So when I use the Patron app, I have to log out of one and then into the other in order to get to the messages. And it's so, yeah, because it's an app, it doesn't necessarily have it doesn't remember the password like it does if I go through on the on my Google browser. I blame Joe Swinson, Ian Blackford, and Jeremy Corbyn for Brexit getting over the line. They should not have agreed to that monumentally stupid general election in 2019. Patrick, I couldn't agree with you more. Because the way I look at it is like Tory's going to Tory. You need to put them in a box and make sure they don't Tory hard enough to destroy the economy of this country. But yeah, we didn't put them in a box. We let them roam free and said, let's have an election in the middle of winter with really unpopular leaders of the opposition parties. Yay! 1984, when Kinnock sold out the working class just because he panicked when Thatcher offering a better deal. Yeah, but in 1983, we had an election and Labour got absolutely battered. And although we would like to see Labour be more socialist, be more left-wing, we have to deal with the reality that we live in a democracy. Unless you want to live in a dictatorship where we demand that people vote a certain way, Labour need to make themselves, I would say appealing to voters, but it's not just that. It's also the fact that they need to make themselves, make it so they don't terrify the people who would otherwise vote for the Conservatives, because we want them to stay at home or vote Labour or just not vote at all. Just stay at home next year in order for Labour and the other parties as well to romp home. Don't forget, on this channel, we're not just saying vote for Labour. We're advocating for the entire destruction of the Tory party. We want it ground up and scattered as dust to the four winds. So as the only way to do that is by tactical voting. We are encouraging tactical voting on this channel because we want the Tories destroyed. We would quite like to see the Liberal Democrats as the official opposition. That'll be great. Followed up by the SNP. That'll be great. They're asking questions at question time. And the one solo Tory MP who's left doesn't get to do very much because they're a fringe party after the elections next year. I don't know if that's going to happen, but we can dream. We can dream. Ed Catflap, thank you very much for the £2 super chat. Merry Christmas, Graham. Have a good one. You too, mate. You too. Yeah, I'm going to be visiting my parents this Christmas and in Liverpool, so I'll be over there. Might do a Christmas special. Who knows? I was going to do a very quick look at the papers, but I mean it's all different things today. There's nothing about the economy, but I don't think those economic figures came out until this morning. So obviously there's a thing about the horrific crime that was committed in Prague yesterday, in which 15 people were killed, and the Daily Mail putting a bikini woman on the front to, I don't know, because oh god, I hate them. And then the Daily Express is leading about the assisted dying law, which is worth talking about in a program in itself, I think, because Keir Starmer said that he wants to bring in, he's open for debate about assisted dying and euthanasia. And I feel like this is something that is overdue in this country. I think that, as I said in an earlier episode this week, the one thing that you should own in this life is your body. I made a video about the government's transgender guidance for schools last night, and I thought something else that you should own, which is your name. You know, what you want people to call you, that should be yours. That should be your thing, that no one can demand otherwise. And yeah, so I'll add that to your own body. As long as you're not hurting somebody else, as long as you don't change your name to something really offensive, that's like anti-Semitic or something, then yeah, change your name. Be who you want to be. This is your one chance on this planet, people. You know, enjoy it. Do what you want, as long as you're not hurting somebody else. Okay, so I'm going to. Duke says I don't like Starmer because it's something I read in a right-wing newspaper, and that for some reason, as a supposed leftist, I believe for some reason, yes, Duke, it's a bit like that. But yeah, what Starmer needs to do, and we've said this a million times, is just be quite inoffensive, because it's not about necessarily getting people on the hard left fired up to vote for Starmer. That's not enough. If that was enough, Corbyn would have won in 2017. Corbyn would have won in 2019. It's not enough. We need to appeal to the centre grounds in order to win. I'm sorry, but they're the only tools we've got that we can possibly use to win this battle of, you know, hearts and minds, ideologies. We need to shift the Overton window to the left massively, and we're not going to do that unless we get into power. It's as simple as that. So I'll be back at 1 o'clock for the roundup of the week. That is the agenda with Phil Morehouse. Yeah. And then I should be back tonight at 9 o'clock for a special edition of the Labour Social. So look out for that. So please subscribe, hit the bell notification icon, and you will be notified when we're about to go live. And also, don't forget to like. I always forget to tell people to like. I always forget to tell people not to forget to like. But if you do, that really helps the algorithms get down to it. So please do that. That'd be great. So 1 o'clock today for the agenda and 9 o'clock tonight for the Labour Social. Thank you very much. Three sleeps till Santa, says Patrick. Easy for you to say. So until next time, thank you so much for watching. Thank you for the chat. Thank you for the super chat. And until next time, I'll say hello, good evening, welcome, and goodbye.